My name is Sue Pine and I'm an education consultant. For the past few years I've been working with Te Toi Tupou as a maths facilitator within the ministry PLD, and this year I'm working for myself as an independent consultant, working privately with schools as well as still delivering the Ministry of Education professional learning and development. I'm doing that through core education. One of the biggest hurdles for teachers is starting to establish the environment for students to work in a problem-solving approach. They need to be able to set up norms and expectations so students know what it looks like to collaborate with others. They understand the expectations around talking with each other and how they are to talk to each other. So a teacher needs to take time to set up rights and responsibilities of students when they're talking with each other, but they also need to understand what are the things that you are expected to do. Students aren't used to justifying their thinking in mathematics and talking about their thinking and explaining their thinking. Often it's been independent work, so this is quite new for the students to do. So teachers have to support and scaffold the students into that way of working. As part of that, children are so used to being told how to solve a problem that all of a sudden they have to think for themselves. And teachers need to be able to support the students and offer ways of working so that they are able to solve problems with their own thinking rather than relying on a teacher telling them how to solve the problem. So in the beginning, students struggle with this way of working, but you really as a teacher need to persevere with it. One of the other barriers I find is that when I talk to teachers about problem solving, they get this preconceived idea about what problem solving looks like. They automatically think, oh, but children, they can't solve problems like that because they can't read the problems, or that the children don't like working that way. But it's less about the word problems and more about the way that you work in your classroom with the students. It's a pedagogy. It's about supporting students to work together and explain their thinking, and less about actually the word problems. And when we think about problem solving, it could be a really good open question. It could be an inquiry. It's not just around developing a word problem, and it's not just around developing word problems within strategy either. The two hurdles I think actually are around teacher beliefs and student beliefs. So from the teacher's point of view, we've always worked our students, whether it be in maths or in literacy, in ability groups. And in actual fact, that's been quite a big part of our maths programs in the past, is that based on strategy stage, we put the students in those mixed ability groups, in those ability groups. And all of a sudden we're turning around and we're saying, actually, we're going to mix those abilities up. And I think teachers don't look to other areas like science or social sciences or health. We work children in mixed ability groups already. So it's actually taking that pedagogy and just implementing it in our maths classrooms. But also along with that, the teachers need to be able to find problems which are diverse enough that children's different ways of looking at a problem are appreciated within that problem. So looking for opportunities like open-ended questions or investigations where the different perspectives are useful in solving that problem, or it draws on the different perspectives from the students. Teachers often base their judgments in their classrooms of their students, again, like on their ability to do computation within the number framework, if you like. But this is only one aspect of mathematics, and we need to pay more attention to all the other areas of maths. Some students are particularly good in geometry or measurement. In actual fact, fractions is a really nice place to develop problems in, because it doesn't separate those abilities so much anymore for the students. And actually, sometimes I've been working with students and I've given them a fractions problem. It's happened more than once. And the students who are perceived to have the best ability actually try to solve the fraction problem using decimals, but in actual fact, for that particular problem, it's much more useful to just use simple fractions. And the students who are perceived as being less ability, they can solve that problem so much more easily because they're happy to use the models and draw the diagrams. So there's also, which brings me into that student perception of how good they are at mathematics. The feeling for those students is that, oh, I'm good at maths, so I need to show that I can use decimals. But actually they haven't really looked at the problem and what is the problem really asking us to do. And that also comes from that whole idea that our students have been so used to ability grouped in the past. You know, students who arrive in our classrooms now in a mixed ability situation, for most of their schooling they've been ability grouped. So they arrive with this mindset about whether they can or cannot do maths. You know, when they were at 5 years old, they were put in the circles maths group. And now they're at year 6, they're in the triangles, but actually they know that the triangles is actually just a new name for the circles. And children know which ability group they've been put in. So already they arrive in our classrooms thinking they can or cannot do maths. And for those students who think that they can do maths, when they make a mistake, they don't cope with that, so they don't want to take risks. For those children who think they can't do maths, they don't want to contribute because they don't think they have anything to contribute. But if we provide them opportunities where a problem benefits different perspectives, then those different abilities don't show up as wide anymore. In actual fact, some of those children are able to solve those problems more effectively than some of those children who are perceived as better mathematicians. How could they overcome these hurdles considering the urgency of the engagement needed? Well, I suggest with teachers when you first start out with mixed ability, think not just mixed ability but flexible groupings. And start small perhaps. So in a small class in your younger year levels, work with 6 to 8 children, but don't leave the child out who isn't able to count yet. Put that child into that group where the children are perhaps learning to skip counts. That child who can't one-to-one count can be included in that group. And I've seen this really, and more again, I've seen it a couple of times with teachers working in this way where I've said, bring that child into this group and see what happens. What happens is that child gets to work with another child who's slightly better than them, and they're learning from each other. But at the same time, that child who sat in the group in the beginning and couldn't count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they were going 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, their partner is supporting them and helping them count all of that one-to-one counting. Meanwhile, that child might be still skip counting as well, that same problem. But if you've got older students, you can probably work with maybe 12 students just to start with, but mix them into groups of 3 or 4 students. And within those groups, look for opportunities where students can, again, be involved in problems that aren't based on strategy. So we want problems that perhaps are based around fractional thinking, measurement problems, or perhaps an inquiry on investigation in geometry. These rich tasks, which benefit from those different perspectives, often support students who aren't so good at strategy. Jo Boaler. When I read her book, Mathematical Mindsets, I was really convinced about this way of working. And she relates to her research, and she's got a lot of research that's sitting inside that book. So that was the book and the piece of work that really made me think about the way that I was teaching mathematics or supporting mathematics teaching and learning in schools. Her Railside High research draws on this, which is working with middle school students, where the students are working in mixed ability groups around rich problems and rich group-worthy tasks, if you like. When their data was compared at the end of the year against other schools of the same kind of socioeconomic makeup, these students perform so much better. So that was the first piece of work that really informed my thinking around this. And other people involved in that, like Suzanne Chapin with the talk moves, that's one of the things I suggest to teachers. That's what you need to get going first in your classroom. Get students talking. Even if you don't want to give the mixed ability a go at first, get your students used to talking to each other and working in groups and justifying their thinking. And whilst the talk moves are so simple in the way that they are presented, they are imperative to be implemented in a classroom, from my opinion. And they support that framework for teachers questioning students and students having to justify their thinking in their maths class. Going back to Jo Bowler, she's got a fantastic website, which is where I often direct teachers to as well. Like, if you want to get started in this way, go and have a look at Jo Bowler's website and start with her week of inspirational maths, because it takes you back to how do you set up those norms again, around what do I like, how do I like to work in a group, what don't I like. And as the week goes on, you can start to set up that environment for students to work in these on these rich tasks and within mixed ability groups. Actually, and the great thing about Jo Bowler's book, Mathematical Mindsets, is that it's really easy to read. It's makes so much sense. And I mean, I had a teacher come to me just last week and show me and said, "Sue, I'm reading this book. It has just changed the way I've thought about the way I teach mathematics." And that's what we hear from teachers all the time. When they've read her book or they've looked at her website and engaged in her week of inspirational maths, and really engaged in that week of inspirational maths, they come away buzzing about the change in the way their students think about themselves as mathematicians and how they engage in problems. And it's just a really nice place to get started on this way of working. Go and see someone. Go and see a teacher who is already working this way. And secondly, talk to the students who are working in a classroom this way. Just last week, I had a teacher come to me and say how excited they were about what they were seeing happen in their classroom. They had come into this school where, they had come from a school where they were very procedural in their approach. They were using textbooks and a program, a mathematics program, where you followed each step of the textbook, if you like. And so he was quite convinced that this is the way that we should be doing mathematics. But of course, he came into a school where the problem-solving approach and the mixed ability grouping was well on its way, and so he was asked that he be part of the PLD to change the way he was working. And he was resistant in the beginning, but he persevered with it, and with the support of the other teachers, collaborative planning and watching each other teach and those kinds of things, he has completely changed the way he thinks about maths, and he's really excited about the way that he's working in maths. And I saw him teach last week as well, and I saw the change in the way that he taught with his students. He's asking questions of his students. The students know that they're expected to explain their thinking. The students are happy to work in a group with anyone. It doesn't matter which group they're in. They know that they're expected to work in different groups for their problem-solving approach. But then also talking to the students. When you talk to students who are used to the traditional way of teaching maths, normally your children who aren't that great at maths don't have fantastic things to say about it. Probably your kids who like maths really like that way of working. But once you start talking to students after they've worked in this way authentically, who have really been working consistently through mixed ability groups and solving problems and working on inquiries and rich tasks, they will tell you how much they really enjoy working this way. They talk about being able to work with their friends and talk about their thinking with their friends. They talk about being able to ask each other for support and asking questions when they don't understand, and knowing that they've got that support to help them solve the problems. They actually talk about how they love to be challenged as well, and that they're solving really difficult problems along the way, but at the same time they're gaining confidence from that. So those would be my two go-to places for having a look at whether this approach works for you. But the other thing about it is give it a go, and start with Joe Bowler's website, U Cubed, and the Week of Inspirational Maths. But really look at each problem and each task of the day, and think about the questioning and the deep maths that's coming from that, and persevere with it. Don't give up, because the children aren't used to working this way, so they aren't going to talk in the beginning. That's probably the first thing that happens, that the children sit around and don't know how to start with a problem. But with a bit of scaffolding and some support, they start to realise, actually, I'm allowed to draw my own thinking. I don't have to guess what's in the teacher's mind anymore. It's about, how do I want to solve this problem, and what thinking do I bring to this problem? What I'd also include in that part is that, on our NZ Maths website, there is a rich resource of problems in there that you can go to use with your students, and you know that that they're at the right level. You know that they're part of our curriculum, so use those with your students. Our Figure It Out books that we have in our schools, there are lots of really fantastic inquiries, investigations, and rich tasks in those Figure It Out books that we can use with our students as group problems rather than as independent work. I mean, we often complain about our Figure It Out books being too wordy, but you can take those tasks out of Figure It Out and you can modify them to use with a group of students, and you can take the wordiness out. But part of your problem solving is actually, you talk about the problem before the students go away and solve it. And that's a really important part about the problem solving approach, is that you don't just give children a problem to go away and do it. You need to make sure that before they start working on the problem, they understand what the problem is asking them to do. You've unpacked the language of the problem. You've identified the important information. And the children have had an opportunity to ask questions if they're not sure. And then the students go away and work on the problem.